Cassie Newman was the little girl who the Young and the Restless fans watched grow up on screen. Sharon's daughter, Nick's adopted daughter, the red-haired, freckle-faced, button-nosed little darling of the Newman family. And then, in 2005, Y&R killed her. And I really cannot overstate how shocking that was. Cassie was loved. She wasn't just some random kid who they shuffled in and then shuffled away to go bake cookies. She was Cassie. We had watched Sharon find the daughter who she thought she had lost. We had watched Nick become her adopted father, and we watched Cassie become an important part of the Newman family. And then suddenly, she was gone. Cassie's death changed everything. For Nick, for Sharon, for Daniel, for Phyllis, for the entire Newman family. It was devastating. And Y&R wanted it that way. Long before Cassie Newman's death, Cassidy Johnson was a part of Sharon's secret past. When Sharon Collins first shimmied her way into Nick's life, she told him she was a virgin. But that wasn't true. Back in Madison, Wisconsin, where Sharon was from, she had gotten pregnant by her older boyfriend, Frank Barrett. She gave birth to a little girl and then put that baby up for adoption. Nick had no idea. In 1997, Sharon's best friend turned rival for Nick's attention, Grace Turner, tracked Cassie down and exposed the secret that Sharon didn't want exposed. Nick found out, and he was hurt, and he was angry. He and Sharon already had a perfect family. They already had baby Noah, and now there was this secret child with someone else. But to know Cassie was to love Cassie. She was this sweet little girl who was living with an older woman named Millie and Millie's daughter Alice, and they loved her but weren't in the best position to care for her. Cassie needed more, and Sharon wanted to give it to her, and eventually Nick did too. Nick became her father, the best, most adorable father, and Victor and Nikki became her grandparents. They were delighted to have this sweet little girl wandering the grounds of the ranch, breathing fresh life into the Newman family. Camryn Grimes started playing Cassie when she was 6 years old. And she stayed on the show too. In fact, she was so good that in the year 2000, she became the youngest actress ever to win the Daytime Emmy for Outstanding Younger Actress. So Cassie wasn't just some side character. She was front burner. And then she started to grow up, and it was noticeable. Cassie became a teenager, and suddenly that sweet little girl that we once knew started making teenage choices, sneaking out, testing the limits, wanting to wear makeup, and crushing on Daniel Romalotti. Ultimately, that was the decision that would lead to the end of her life. Daniel Romalotti was super hot, and he was super cool, and he also had that troubled bad boy vibe about him. And he was a little older than Cassie, and he was involved with Lily Winters, which did not stop Cassie from developing a very serious crush on him. Cassie wanted Daniel to see her differently, so she snuck out of the house one night and went to a party. Daniel was there, and Daniel got drunk, really drunk. And by the time Cassie found him, he was in a pretty bad condition and in no condition to drive himself home. So Cassie made the decision that she would be the one to drive him home. But Cassie didn't have a license. She didn't know how to drive. She was a child trying to handle this very adult situation. It was heartbreaking before the crash even happened, because yes, she was making a bad choice, but she was also trying to help someone she cared about. She was trying to protect Daniel. She was trying to be close to him. She was trying to prove that she wasn't a little girl anymore. So Cassie got Daniel into the car. She got behind the wheel. She drove. And then the car crashed. Cassie was critically injured. Daniel was injured too, and when the vehicle was found, what had happened looked obvious. Daniel had been drinking. Daniel was the older teen. Daniel had to be the one driving the car. So very quickly, Daniel Romalotti became the villain of Cassie's death. There was just one problem. Daniel wasn't driving. So, who was driving when Cassie died? Well, Cassie was. That's the part that a lot of fans misremember. Daniel was drunk, and Daniel's drinking put everything into motion, but he was not behind the wheel when the car crashed. Cassie was. That's part of what made it so tragic. And for a while, even Cassie didn't fully remember what had happened. She was in the hospital. She was hurt. And everyone was just trying to understand the situation. Nick was furious. Sharon was terrified. Daniel was being blamed. And Phyllis was doing damage control. Then Cassie's memory started to come back. And she realized that Daniel was being blamed for something he did not do. So she tried to fix it. while she was still injured, while she was still supposed to be recovering at the hospital, Cassie left the hospital. She walked out looking for Daniel because she wanted to clear his name, but her body could not handle it. Nick found her at Crimson Lights. She collapsed, and when she was taken back to the hospital, everything changed. Before that, it actually looked like maybe everything was going to be okay. After that, nothing would ever be okay again. So, the question, how did Cassie die on The Young and the Restless, has two parts. She died because of her injuries from the car accident, but she also made it worse because she left the hospital. She wanted everyone to know the truth. She wanted to make it right, but instead, it all went wrong. As she was lying there, dying in the hospital bed with Nick and Sharon by her side, Cassie actually told her parents that they would have another little girl someday. And they did. Faith. A deathbed premonition. But that was still 4 more brutal years away. And it didn't take away the fact that Nick and Sharon were losing the little girl that they had right now. Cassie Newman died on May 24th, 2005. She was 14 years old. I will never forget that day. I know exactly what old couch I was sitting on when it happened. And I couldn't believe it was actually happening. So many times, Y&R only makes it look like someone is going to die. But then they don't. They go right to the brink of death, and then they make a miraculous recovery. They turn it around. And this was Cassie. A kid. Y&R wouldn't kill a kid. And then they did. The Cassie Newman death scene is one of those moments that Y&R fans do not forget. If you were watching back then, you probably remember what old couch you were sitting on too. Cassie dying was not just shock value. It was emotional value. She was dying in front of her parents who had fought so hard to become her parents. And that is what made the Nick and Sharon Cassie death aftermath so painful. Nick and Sharon were grieving the same loss, but they were not grieving the same way. Nick was angry. Cassie tried to tell him the truth, tried to tell him that she was driving, but he didn't want to hear it. The anger at Daniel is what was fueling him. It was what was keeping him going, even after the evidence came out. A piece of Cassie's boot heel was found under the accelerator, and that proved that Cassie had been the one driving the car. Daniel was drunk. Daniel made a terrible choice, but Daniel was not driving. Cassie's death broke something in Nick. It pushed him toward Phyllis, and that affair becomes a whole separate story. And Sharon could not pull him back. Phyllis got pregnant with Summer, and Nick and Sharon divorced. But their bond over Cassie never went away. Nick and Sharon continued honoring the anniversary of Cassie's death for years. They visited her grave together. They took her flowers. They shared their favorite memories of her, and they kept carrying her with them, and that felt very real. Because parents don't just lose a child and then move on because the next storyline starts. Y&R actually let Cassie's death remain a part of the show, a part of the story. And then, years later, shocker of all shockers, Cassie showed up in a new story. Why did they kill off Cassie on The Young and the Restless? That's the practical question Y&R fans were asking at the time. Camryn Grimes had already won an Emmy. She had grown up on the show. And from the outside, it didn't look like Y&R had run out of reasons to keep her alive. But apparently, the show wanted to create a tragedy that was so big, it would break up Nick and Sharon. And what the writers settled on was the worst possible tragedy: losing their daughter. Camryn Grimes later said that learning Cassie would die was so emotional for her. And I can only imagine playing this role was not just a job she had for a minute. It was life-defining. She had been playing this role since she was 6 years old. But soap deaths are not always final. Camryn Grimes made guest appearances coming back as the ghost of Cassie many, many times over the years. Nick or Sharon would see her. They would have a vision of what she would have looked like, and they would take comfort in it. But then, in 2013, those visions started becoming a little more real. In 2013, years after Cassie's death, Sharon started seeing Cassie a lot. And the visions seemed more real this time. At first, Sharon thought her mind was playing tricks on her. And that made sense. Well, Y&R sense. Because Sharon was off her medication. Surely that's it. But then Y&R pulled the rug out. This Cassie was not just inside Sharon's mind. She was real. Victor Newman had hired a Cassie lookalike to haunt Sharon. Partly because he wanted Nick to question Sharon's sanity and stay away from her, and partly because Sharon was keeping a secret. A big one. Sharon had changed Summer's paternity test to make it look like Jack was Summer's father. And Victor was determined to drag that truth out of her. So he hired a woman named Mariah Copeland, who just so happened to look exactly like Cassie. But this wasn't your standard, everyone on soaps has someone out there who looks exactly like them. A few months later, Y&R revealed another twist. Mariah was actually Cassie's twin. Sharon had given birth to twins. Cassie had been raised away from Sharon. Mariah had been stolen and raised away too. So Cassie didn't come back from the dead, but Camryn Grimes came back. And through Mariah, Sharon gained a daughter that she never knew she had. That is a very soapy circle. Cassie Newman died in 2005, but she was never really gone from the show. And I think that's what makes this story so different. Y&R has killed characters before. Y&R has even brought the actor back as a twin before. But Cassie's death stayed present. It was present at every anniversary that Nick and Sharon honored her. It was present in Daniel's reality of what happened that night. And then later, it was present in Mariah. Mariah did not replace Cassie. In fact, in many ways, Mariah was the exact opposite of Cassie. Mariah was capable of secrets and lies and manipulation, and maybe in some ways that's better. Because no soap character can stay freckle-faced and button-nosed forever. Cassie's death and then the twin reveal through Mariah gave us Camryn Grimes in a whole new way. It gave viewers a new storyline to follow, and it gave Nick and Sharon new reasons to bond. So, now I want to hear your memories, Y&R fans. Did you watch The Young and the Restless Cassie death episode when it originally aired? Do you remember what old couch you were sitting on? And an even juicier question, if Cassie had lived, do you think Nick and Sharon would have stayed together? Leave me your thoughts in the comments.